Today's topic will be Women in Biotech panel, and we are really excited to have you all here, and we hope to have like an exciting conversation. And before I go ahead and introduce the event and the panelists, I would like to thank ABSI being a sponsor for the event. And I'm gonna quickly share my screen to go over the code of conduct. So just give me a second while I do that. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna read quickly that we ask you to be respectful and please mute yourself when you're not talking and don't interrupt when someone else is speaking. And if we'll have to like remove you if you violate our code of conduct. And if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to us via email on this email provided. And we would also like if you could just like introduce yourself in the chat and state what brought you here. And if you have any questions throughout the event, please either raise your hand in the or like just put your question in the chat, and we will get back to you. So, okay. Okay. So the next thing, I would just like briefly introduce all of our panelists and ask them to like just say a few words before we go ahead and get started. Just a little bit about the agenda before that. What we will, after I introduce the panelists, we will go through the questions that we received during the event registration, and we received a good amount of questions. So we'll try to go through as much as we can in the beginning, and then around 12:30, we would like open the floor to questions from people in the chat, or yeah, if anyone has any other questions. And at the end, if due to some reasons we are not able to like go through all the questions, we will provide the contact info of all the panelists. So if you have any more questions, or if you would like to like talk to them personally, so please feel free to reach out to them. And at the end, we would just like ask each speaker to give a final piece of advice. And yeah, so I will now go ahead and introduce our first panelist, who is Rachel Dreilinger, who is a biomedical engineer and entrepreneur with 23 years of experience in startups, consulting, lab automation, DNA synthesis, and medical device development. She received her BS in Bioengineering from UC San Diego in 1999, and currently she's the co-founder and CEO of a neurosurgery device company called NeuraMedica Inc.
That was perfect. You got my name right. Thank you for that nice introduction. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. As you mentioned, I'm a biomedical engineer. I'm also co-founder and CEO of a neurosurgery device company. Technically, I'm in medtech, but my early career was in biotech. I did work at Aurora Biosciences and Illumina early on. I'm also not a PhD. I might be the only one on here that's not. I also don't have a master's degree. I also don't have an MBA, so you can see what you can do with just that bachelor's degree. Happy to answer questions and just share about my experience, both the good and the bad. And then I think you can move on maybe to someone else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have here is Caroline Hostetler. Dr. Hostetler is leader in digital therapeutics and currently is the director of medical affairs strategy at Mahana Therapeutics, which is a startup expanding access to evidence-based treatment in chronic conditions. She received her BS in biology from University of Maryland and a PhD in psychology from UC Davis and a postdoc in behavioral neuroscience at here at OHSU, and she is also a founder of the Portland Women in Science, including like 5 years as a founder. So we are really excited to have you here.
Thank you. It is so exciting to see the size of this Lunch and Learn, having been here all the way from the beginning. So I'm just thrilled to be here and to be able to share some of my experiences. I have worked in pharma and in the last few years on the med tech side. And so I'm really happy to talk about my experiences at different size companies as well. I've worked at big pharma and I've worked at startups. So really excited to share whatever insights I can to help others with their career development. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Next on here, we have Nora Greenberg-Bod. So she's the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Aranora, and Dr. Verbod received her PhD in Physiology and Pharmacology at OHSU and completed her postdoctoral training on mechanisms of inflammation and asthma at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Dr. Verbod has co-authored 21 scientific publications and has been PI on multiple NIH grants totaling over 7 million. During her time at Aranora, Dr. Verbod managed the AB002 drug development program from preclinical evaluation, IND, phase 1 and phase 2. Welcome, Dr. Verbod.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be a panelist here today. Very happy to see familiar faces from my past. As Ravina mentioned, I've been a life sciences professional in a biotech startup since 2010 and have primarily been operating within that space at the same company, which is probably a bit different perhaps than the normal path where people are jumping from company to company. And I can share a bit about my experiences about why I've stayed and what I've learned, and thank you.
Thank you, welcome. The next we have here is Angel Moreau, who is the Associate Director, Data Science at AppSci. She received her PhD in microbiology and immunology from Georgetown University while performing research at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. She then moved on to Duke University for postdoctoral studies in stem cell biology of skin and intestinal epithelia. Throughout her lab career, she developed computational tools and methods to streamline data collection and gain novel insights from complex analysis of biological data. Welcome, Dr. Morrow.
Hi, and so serious, Dr. Morrow. The only person I say has to call me that is my sister. But it's really nice to be here. Very excited to see so many people in the AppSci Town Hall and on the call. And I'm really excited to share any insights that I have about transitioning from academia to industry, and any insights or any questions, answer any questions people might have about democratizing data. So thank you.
Cool. Next we have on our panel is Heather Zelko, who is Data Science Associate 2 at AbbVie Pharmaceuticals. Heather graduated from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign with a Bachelor of Science in Bioengineering. In May of 2020, she has recently completed the 2-year clinical trial operations development program at AbbVie Pharmaceutical, and passionate about data science and coding. Heather has continued these interests within the data science and analytical department. And she has a passion for coding in Python and use of analytics to further advancements in healthcare and medicine. So, hello.
Hello, thank you so much for having me today. I'm hoping I can bring a little bit more insight into the transition straight out of college into industry and the different interesting experiences that come along with that. And I also only have a bachelor's degree, so for those that are looking to join industry right away, perhaps I can give some additional insight into the different opportunities there. Thank you.
Cool. So now that we are done with introductions, we can go ahead and go to the part, like the fun part, which is like asking the questions that we received during event registration. So I'm just gonna, let's like a question and then we can just have a discussion. Everyone can, just feel free to drop ideas. So my first question is, how did you get started in biotech, and what are some of the good resources to learn about biotech?
Can start. do the icebreaker here. So I followed a traditional, I guess, path after academia, graduated with my PhD, and I did a postdoc for 2 years. And during that time, I became aware that I didn't want the role that my professor had, which to me involved a lot of fundraising and concern over making sure that all of the trainees stayed employed. And so at that time, I really used that postdoc to start to establish connections with other types of committees so I could learn about opportunities outside of academia. And so that included working within the local postdoc association, the National Postdoc Association, and friends that had scientific friends that had connections with other companies. And so after I had kind of added these kind of soft skills or committee style, competencies, I felt that I was ready to try and apply for a job in biotech. And so I sought a position back at Portland because that's where my family was. And I was looking really to head back into that area. And so I was able to leverage a connection that I had through school to probe about opportunities and found a biotech startup that was a spinoff from OHSU and interviewed for that. And that's where I got my start in 2010. So those were kind of the activities that led me from my postdoc back to Portland, working for the biotech I'm at right now.
I'm happy to jump in next. I think that getting involved in biotech for me goes back to maybe high school and even elementary school, and just a really strong interest in science, technology, biology. I really love biology. I would sort of read books about medicine and surgery when I was a kid. I just always found it very fascinating, but I never had a desire to go to medical school or be a doctor. So I was always encouraged to think about or study engineering because I was good in math and science. I think a lot of us probably experienced that. So back when I went to college, it was in 1994, there weren't a lot of bioengineering or biomedical engineering programs at the time. So what I did is I just looked around at all the universities in the US that had bioengineering or biomedical engineering. And, I applied to a handful of those. So I ended up going to UC San Diego, and they do have one of the top programs in the country, which is great. And, getting into biotech sort of after that, the bioengineering degree is so broad, you can do so many different things with it. And I do encourage people to consider bioengineering as a degree. But I sort of got into biotech because right around La Jolla, where UC San Diego is, are just a ton of biotech companies. So I right out of college, I was interning at Aurora Biosciences and ended up getting a job there. Up the street was Illumina, ended up moving over there. So that's kind of how I got my start and sort of figured out I was interested in that.
I'm happy to chime in next. So I think I'm kind of similar to Nora. So I did a very long postdoc. I put all my eggs in the academic basket, and then at some point, realized I needed to pivot. And so my approach to the pivot first was to think about all the things that I wanted in my next step. What were the things about my skill set or about my day-to-day that I liked? What did I not? Especially because I know for myself, I'm a very excitable person and I kind of like everything. And so I wanted to have something that grounded me with what I was actually looking for first, so that as I started to explore career path opportunities, I could kind of come back to that. So that was something really important and helpful for me. And then as I kind of started exploring different potential career paths, once I kind of settled on the one that I happened to find one that checked all those boxes for me, I was very fortunate. I did a lot of informational interviews out the wazoo, just so that I could actually show that I knew what I was getting myself in for, since I didn't have industry experience. And so that, I think, set me up for a lot of success. So I just wanted to share kind of some of those tips. And once I was on the industry side of things, I am like, you can move around. It's so like it's like the easiest thing. I actually got laid off yesterday. So that is a risk of being in a startup environment. I know that I can pivot. I am not worried about it. I'm not stressed out about it. I'm sad about my job because I loved it. But like once you're on the industry side, the world is your oyster. And I think that would be like one of the biggest takeaways I could give today. But those were some of my strategies, was just thinking about what I actually wanted, and then just learning more and talking to people. And people love talking to you. I mean, look at all of us right now on this panel. So.
Yeah, for me, I think I might be a little atypical here in that I was very headstrong into wanting to pursue an academic career. And in the spirit of full candor, I'm disabled, and during my postdoc, that began to impact me very severely, to the point that my doctor said I had to stop and really pivot, or I was going to really harm myself. So I was kind of forced into like looking at other options. But I found when I did that, I gained a lot in work-life balance that made me much more innovative than when I was really putting my nose to the grindstone and just kind of spinning my wheels and, always feeling panicked about, I should be reading a paper. I should be doing more experiments. I should be in the lab. I should be writing a grant. All of that was gone. And I found that left much more room to think about cool stuff. And I was worried about not being able to do science, like do real science in industry. And I found that to be utterly untrue. So I'm really grateful in a way that I had to make this pivot. That really was kind of a choice that was taken away from me, but it ended up really being a very great thing. I'm really happy about it. And I think I was very fortunate that when I was making that transition, I just happened to do some job searches like on LinkedIn, and I found this one perfect position that like I couldn't have ticked off more boxes to like fit me perfectly, and that ended up working out. So I know it's not always going to be like that for everybody, but I think I can echo what Caroline said, that once I was sort of in industry, it became much easier to sort of to shop around and move and find things that worked better for me.
In a different sense, when I first started college, I was under the impression I wanted to get a PhD. And about 2 years in and 2 years of doing traditional research experience in college, I realized that was not the fit for me, and that I didn't want to pursue a PhD in the near future. So something I looked for specifically were companies that offered a development program or a chance to rotate through a few different positions upon graduating college, because I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to stay within a bioengineering focus, within a biotech landscape, but as for that, I really wasn't quite sure. So I really leveraged my network at school, just talking to other students, talking to professors, and even LinkedIn and Handshake, and just searching out different companies that offer development program members or programs to join, and then searching out people I had seen who went to the same university as me that had worked for these companies, and asking them about their experiences in those development programs or just experiences with the company in general, and really just taking the chance to hear the good and the bad they had to say about their different experiences, and ultimately decided that taking a step away from academia for a while was what I needed after graduating college, and joining industry was the right fit for me.
Thank you. Our next question would be, what skills would you recommend graduate students to work on to be more competitive when they want to like apply for jobs?
Learn to code. 100% learn to code.
Network. Learn how to network and put yourself out there and learn from people. And yeah, networking is huge.
Find resources outside of that academic track that could be anything from, if you want to learn about the regulatory process of drug development, the FDA actually has a ton of streaming things that are available, or you could take a short course in project management applied to science, or you could take a course through many other free online or small fee. Use these resources available that are through virtual classrooms.
I didn't go to graduate school, but I've worked with PhDs, and I think one thing I could say is look for great mentors, whether it's in academia or outside of academia. As someone said, you know, resources for if you want to move into industry. Someone just mentioned project management skills, really important, and I think they apply to both areas, as well as the grant writing. You know, of course, grant writing in academia is huge. It's also huge in industry. And I have written many grants with the help of, you know, PhDs and other advisors. So that's my 2 cents.
Having not been a graduate student, I can't speak to that experience, but I can speak to saying that knowing how to communicate a very technical topic to somebody who may have no background in that area is very common in industry. You may be working with people who code and have to explain something to somebody who does not code at all. So being able to break down very different advanced topics into something anybody can understand is very key to being able to accurately portray that information.
I think related to that is the soft skills of just being able to work on a team. I think there's this, I don't think it's that true, but there's this stereotype that scientists are not good communicators, or that they're hard to work with because they're very independent, all of this. And so your ability to work on a team, which everyone does in science, and those soft skills of communicating to different audiences, all of that is absolutely huge. And those aren't emphasized in formal training, but those are absolutely front and center when you're out there interviewing. And those are what are going to actually help you succeed in a lot of positions, because a lot of positions are not truly technical. Very few are truly technical.
Great, thank you. Those are some really good points. My next question would be, how did you find your first industry job, and how did you prepare for interviews? How many applications versus interviews versus offers did you get? So.
I'll jump in. I already sort of spoke to it. When I was in college at UCSD, I did some internships. I interned at Intuitive Surgical, and then I interned at Aurora Biosciences. And I feel like that's a really great thing to do. I don't know what the level of everyone in the audience is, but if you're still in college, I would highly encourage internships, because it gives you an idea of the day-to-day work you might be doing if you're really interested and excited about it. But the other great thing is that if you have an internship and then you graduate, you almost have a job right there. So that's kind of what happened with me. I was interning, and then when I graduated, they hired me.
Yeah, I did a lot of informational interviews, and I would even use those to kind of strategically network towards companies and teams that I was interested in. I know some career development people would tell you not to do that, but I think as long as you don't explicitly ask for someone to give you a job referral, it's all fair game. For my first transition into industry, I interviewed for 3 different positions. One, I went through a job recruiter. So depending on the type of work you do, recruiters even can help you break in and can be really good tools. So like that was something that I was not aware of and was so foreign to me, but recruiters are your friend. They get paid if you get hired. So like, you lose nothing by talking to them, and they'll even help you learn what you need to break in, because they are really networked and they know these positions. So don't be afraid if someone starts reaching out to you, if you say you're open to work on your LinkedIn and recruiters, talk to some people that can help you learn as well as get interviews. But for me, it was 3 different companies for me to break in. And for my particular role, it's exceptionally hard to break in. So 3 actually is pretty good, humbly said, but it just depends also on the kind of work you're trying to transition into. So for my particular path, it's incredibly hard, but doable.
I kind of spoke to it with my previous answer, but yeah, definitely. I found the one job, applied for that, and got the job. But I think what it allowed me to do was, they were looking for somebody who was still wanting to be a scientist, but doing it by coding. So it really was kind of perfect for what I was trying to do. And I just kind of wanted to say that those opportunities are out there. And as we continue to grow towards more machine learning heavy types of research programs, there's greater opportunity for bench scientists to kind of become subject matter experts and domain experts in biology, and also have some, experience coding, and that really helps bring us all together and make a lot of greater steps forward.
Yeah, I can just follow up on what I'd said. So I was looking to return back to the West Coast after doing my postdoc. So I had put in some applications for bigger companies in the Bay Area and had some connection where I knew someone who knew someone, but I hadn't been asked for any interviews. And I did get an interview with this startup that I'm at now. And that went really well. And it was a good fit, I think, because the stage of the startup really was preclinical, where we were taking these technologies and still doing kind of the proof of principle studies in animal disease models. And my skill set aligned well with that. And so it was, I think it was a little bit easier for me to fit into that role because it was something really familiar to something I had done in my graduate work and my postdoc. And while I was there, it was situated in a university, although it was a startup, that's where my space was, and I worked on grants. And so it was more of a hybrid role, I think, between biotech and academia. And so the alignment between my experience and what the job was, I think, was really what ended up getting me that spot.
I fully utilized the career fairs, the various and many different career fairs my university offered, and also looked into online career fairs that some companies offered, and taking those opportunities to both learn more about the company, but also to pitch myself to various companies. And that definitely helped with getting interviews after college, but also taking the time to learn about a company before you speak to them at a career fair can go a long way. If you know, yes, what they do, but I think a lot of companies have a focus on culture and they really want to make sure that you're a good fit at the culture at that company. So taking time to learn about it and being able to speak to how you both fit with the company from an industry perspective, but also why the culture would be a good fit for both you and the company.
Great, thank you. The next question is kind of similar to what we just talked, but what experience has helped you the most in your role in biotech, like education, internship, mentorship, or like a particular work position?
I think a lot of what I ended up doing is project management and working within a committee and connected to collaborators. And so I think that if you can kind of use your soft skills that you might have developed through whatever other committees you would have participated in to kind of help navigate a project along, or to build relationships with contract research organizations or external vendors that are doing work on behalf of you. And so I think developing those skills to work on a team, and that was reiterated earlier. That's my advice.
I took full advantage of the mentorship through different people. It doesn't have to be a formal question of will you be my mentor, but sometimes I would just start by asking somebody about their career journey, how they got to the position they were at, and asking questions, especially if I was interested in going into the area they were. I will also say that I took a lot of time to learn to code outside of work, and that opened up a lot of doors for me at my current company and in general after graduating college. And so I didn't have a lot of coding experience in college, but I just took courses online, earned some certificates, and it's gone a long way for me.
I think one thing, oh, sorry, Carolyn.
I was just saying, I second mentorship, especially peer mentorship.
Yeah, so you know, my school I went to, UCSD, was very, very theoretical, super academic. But one thing that I did is I always sort of veered toward, because bioengineering is so broad, I sort of veered toward the mechanical engineering, mechanical design side. So I actually ended up taking some classes in college that I thought were extremely beneficial and other bioengineers did not take. So I ended up taking a machining class, a mechanical design class, and those were so helpful to me in my career because my focus ended up being mechanical design, which is what I love doing. And then with that said, you know, moving into my first job, of course, at school, you learn a lot of different things. But at work, you really learn so much on the job. One thing you would never imagine is important is working with vendors, suppliers, vendor management. A huge part of an engineer's job is just working with vendors. And it's so strange, but it's true. So definitely learn those skills of managing vendors, getting quotes, managing the finance side on a project. The other thing is, you know, at my first job, I had mentors is just huge, so huge. In fact, one of my huge mentors is on this meeting. But, you know, when I first started at my first job, I had mechanical engineering mentors who really taught me how to design. You know, I didn't really learn that at school. So super important to have those people that help you out, and they're so valuable.
Yeah, I hate to be a broken record here, but I think mentoring is really a critical component to my career advancement. I think everybody should have 3 mentors. The first mentor would be like a technical skills mentor, somebody who does the type of work you like to do. A soft skills mentor, so maybe somebody who, you know, public speaking or networking, or like they're just really good at communicating with people. And then also just a life mentor, somebody who lives the kind of life that you want to live. You know, some of those could be combined into a single person, but I think it's really important to find the right people to help guide you and bounce ideas off of, and you know, ask questions. Super critical, and I've been very fortunate here at ABSCI to have wonderful mentoring.
Okay, so we had like more questions, but we just want to like stay on time. So we would like now shift to the questions in the chat for a little bit. And I think the first question that I saw was like, do you recommend doing a postdoc after graduating if a career in industry is the goal? What would be the benefit of doing that versus not? Yeah, I think it's asked by Katie. Yeah.
I think it depends, but I don't think it's that necessary. But I don't regret my postdoc at all because that was the path I wanted to be on at the time. I learned a lot. That being said, do I think I needed to do it for 6 years to be? Is there diminishing returns? Perhaps. But I don't think it's as necessary. But I also think, hopefully there's no like faculty on here that'll hate me for saying this. Like, if you're getting out of grad school and you don't have a job lined up and you can take a postdoc somewhere, take it and then continue looking for a job, because you don't owe your postdoc advisor as much as people tend to think. It's an incredibly underpaid, highly skilled position. Technically, you end up getting paid less than a grad student. Like, grad students cost more money than postdocs. It's a great system. So if you got to stopgap it, it's fine, but don't think you have to fully commit to that while you're also, you know, looking at your journey. Just, you know, do it discreetly or however you need to do. But that would be my straight talk, is if you need a job, take a postdoc to get a paycheck. But I don't think it's as necessary for most jobs.
Yeah. How honest do you want me to be here? Personally, I thought my postdoc was a waste of time. I wish I would have got out of it sooner.
I used my postdoc to help me refine what I wanted to do next steps. And I remember getting this advice from someone while I was doing my postdoc to like basically set aside like 10% of your working time as a postdoc for your own career development. So I was spending at least 10% of my time figuring out, learning, researching things that would be outside of the track that I was currently in. And I felt like that was actually a justified use of time. I still think that practice actually makes a lot of sense because your own career development is going to help you in the role you're in potentially as well. So.
Yeah, I think like an important thing also to consider is like not all postdocs are created equal and not all postdoc faculty members are created equal. Some are workaholic labs where you're in service to the PI, and some are going to really actually be in service to you and your career. And so it really does actually depend, and it also depends on your career path. So for me, going into the pharmaceutical industry, like for the path that I went on, it would have been a good use of my time to do more clinical research, like because I was a preclinical researcher. That actually would have really helped me. And I was fortunate. I didn't do that, but I had a good relationship with my PI. If I wanted to explore that, I could have. So it also just depends on the actual lab itself, which so not all postdocs are created equal because some are going to allow you to explore things like Nora's talking about and develop your career skill set. Some aren't. And we all know that. So I think that's an important distinction to make when you're making those, even your postdoc decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying I wholeheartedly do not recommend a postdoc.
And I'm an example of what you can do with a bachelor's degree in bioengineering and no master's, no PhD, no MBA. So take that how you'd like.
Great, thank you. The next question we have is, what are some areas of research that would be good to do your thesis on in grad school and preparing for a career in biotech?
Where the output is a technology that will benefit human health, I guess, or whether it's a medical device or it's an antibody or understanding a mechanism that could be exploited to develop something that could be commercialized. I think that if you have that in your, as an adjacent goal while you're doing your grad studies, then you're headed in the right direction.
Seconded.
Okay, cool. So
if I could just add on really quickly, from a hiring perspective, I'd say that I don't look specifically at people's specific like thesis topics. I'm really more looking at how they approach solving ideas, how they approach work, how they answer questions. So I would say, you know, just something that allows you to do the best science you can would be my advice.
Great, thank you. Next question is, Angel and Heather have mentioned learning to code, and I have some coding experience, but a lot of imposter syndrome with it because I don't do it full time, and each new coding context holds a steep learning curve for me. Was that a part of your experience, and how did you navigate that?
Imposter syndrome is very real. I've been coding for my job full time now for over a year, and I still face projects where I feel that I'm not qualified or enough, or I don't have enough experience. It's something you're going to learn to work with, but it's also something that having a strong network can help you with. So having people you can talk to about different coding languages, asking questions, bouncing ideas off of, perhaps if you're getting an opportunity to code as part of your job, expressing concerns to your manager can be very beneficial. If your manager is willing to help look out for you, they could point you towards new resources. They may be able to speak to their experiences. It's also one of those things that each time you get the opportunity to do it, you're going to be doing a better job. You're going to be learning more. So it's really something, it comes with time, but don't discourage yourself, keep learning, because like anything, you spend 4 years in an undergraduate for 5-6 years in a PhD program. It takes time to learn things, so don't discredit yourself. You're probably doing great, and just keep working and leveraging people you know to help you.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better. And yeah, for sure, imposter syndrome is real, and I think it affects all of us. I also think it's important to realize that, and I know that we have some of our software engineers and data scientists on this call from ABSCI. We use Google all the time. Like that's, half of the time when you're coding, you're using Google to figure out an answer to your question. So I don't know that, many people have an encyclopedic knowledge of code snippets that they go to just on deck, ready to go. It takes time. So, just like Heather said, don't forget to step back and look at what you've done and how you've progressed and celebrate that, because it's really easy to forget, with small incremental progress, how far you've come.
Great, thank you. Next question, can you describe cultural differences between large and small companies?
I would love to take this one. So I started my transition into industry at a mid to large size pharmaceutical. I was there for 3 years. There's a lot of financial stability and growth associated with it. There's a lot of golden handcuffs, if you will, for long-term incentives to get people to stay. It was for me a very corporate environment, a very red tape environment, and that makes sense. Like a lot of that is to protect the company and to protect patients. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but often it keeps things from moving forward. And for me personally, I did not like that environment. I'm not as motivated by financial stability and growth, and I don't have to take care of any dependents. So I have that independence to do that. And so then I moved into startups, and startups can be very stressful. My first startup was very stressful and hectic. It's also, I'm working in a space where there's no blueprint for it. Like no one has succeeded commercially. It's a brand new category of treatment. So there's a lot of risk and a lot of unknowns. There's no playbook. That can be both really fun, and it can also be really risky and challenging. And then at my most recent company, the culture was so amazing because we were small and scrappy. And I feel like the senior leadership of smaller companies have a much bigger impact on the overall culture of a company. And I've seen that both in a not so great way, and I've also seen that in a really, really amazing way. And so I think the flip side, of course, is like I said, I got laid off yesterday. So small companies, especially if you're in a startup, you're not commercially viable yet. That is a huge risk. Not only have I lost my income, I've lost any potential for bonus. We're not public yet. So like there's a lot of financial risk to that. Long term, it's fine because I'm employable as hell. Everyone on this call is very employable. Don't let anyone make you think differently. So it's fine. But for me right now, where I have to start thinking about my next move is I'm like, do I still want to stay in these smaller companies where I'm a better cultural fit? Or maybe is it time for me to look back at a little more stability? Because it's different pros and cons. And I think it's very individual, and you will find, I generally say to people I'm mentoring, like whatever your first job as industry is, as long as there isn't a big red flag, take it, get that experience, jump over, get it, you'll be fine. If there's a red flag, don't do it. Trust your gut, because after that, you can go wherever you want. You'll figure out what your values are, what you want from a company culture, what your long-term goals are. And you'll figure out like, oh, this resonates with me or not. For me, big company didn't resonate. People who got hired the same day as me are still at that company and loving it. So it does vary. Don't stress about it. You're young in your career. You'll figure it out. It's fine. Get a job. You'll be set.
I've mostly worked at small to mid-sized companies. I haven't really worked at a really large company. But I will say that I am in a sort of a male-dominated field of engineering, and so a lot of times I've been the only woman on the engineering team. And that's something that I think is so cool about starting my own company. You know, you run into these issues and problems sometimes at a job, and some strange things that people say to you, or discrimination, or whatever you want to call it. And that's always sort of, you know, made me interested in setting up my own company culture that maybe isn't like that. I also consulted for over 10 years, and I really loved being a consultant because I could sort of pick and choose who I worked with. You know, when you're at a job, you don't necessarily get to pick and choose that. But I get to, you know, as I move forward in my career, got more experience, got more confidence. I also just have been able and choose to pick who I work with and sort of avoid the other people that, you know, maybe they don't respect me for whatever reason. That's their problem and not really my problem. So that's one thing I love about sort of doing my own thing, having independence, getting to set my own company culture. And at one point I did have an all woman engineering team, which I thought was really cool. I don't have that right at this exact moment, but I did have that for a while. So, you know, my goal is to have a company where you know, it's a culture that I appreciate.
My experience has been only in a small company. We've been 8 for the last probably 8 years. And before that, you know, I was maybe employee number 3. And I've stayed there that long because the navigating decisions and conversations and strategic directions in a small company is a little bit easier to see with fewer people. And so information can be dispersed really quickly, and you understand what your role is. I also get a lot of autonomy in this role that I'm at because the company is so small that we have to be able to develop our own projects and learn things and acquire competencies we need as the technologies go from preclinical all the way through clinical. And so I've been very well supported in the small company, so I've stayed as long as I have, and I've continued to be able to learn new things to develop a drug. And I appreciate that. Now, I also am curious about working in a larger company, so I was very attuned to what Caroline was saying with respect to how things are different in that setting. But I think that if I was to give advice out to people, my advice would be the same as Caroline, is to take your first one that's available to you. You'll get a sense for whether you like the culture and the nimbleness, the feel of a startup and the risk, or if you prefer the financial stability, and there's space to navigate it once you're in there.
Thank you. We are running a little out of time here, but I would like to ask just one last question. Do you have any ideas on how tech can be made more equitable with focusing efforts on people or women of color?
That is an awesome question, and super important. And I will say that I'm a member of the Navajo Nation. So I am Native. I'm a white Native, but I am Native. And so I have done a lot of work trying to recruit and sort of talking to people I know on the Navajo Nation or the Dene Nation. We've had several Navajo interns who have come. They're students that are interested in biomedical engineering or life sciences, and I've had them come and intern at our office. So we do outreach in that way to try to recruit. So that's one, that's sort of like a personal interest that I have, is doing something for my own community. So we have a fund, my family has a fund where we support Navajo students at the University of Utah Law School, and then on the Navajo Nation at the tribal colleges. So I think to answer the question, I think you have to work at it. I think you have to make it a priority and do something about it. It's very easy to say, oh, there aren't that many. Oh, it's hard to find. Oh, there's, not people available. And that's just kind of I don't want to swear, but that's kind of a BS thing to say. You have to work at it. So it's important to me. And so I do work at that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. as somebody who's also an underrepresented minority, trying to get involved with some of the Latin groups that are helping people encourage Latins and Native Americans in STEM has been something that I've been very involved with throughout my entire career. So it really is something that we have to prioritize if it means something to us, and work on it and tell our leadership that it's important to us. When we're interviewing, I'm starting to now see that people who are interviewing with us are asking questions about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that means a lot, and it's not coming from people who are, it's coming from white guys, right? So I think it's important that we all start speaking up about it and saying that it's important to us. And I think that can really make a difference.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, to be here. I would like to thank the speakers and also the audience. And before we wrap up today's session, I would just ask each speaker to give a final piece of advice. And I would also share, if your questions were not answered, really sorry for that, but I would share the speaker's contact info, which I will also put in the chat. So if you have any more questions, or if your questions were not answered here, feel free to reach out to them. And I would now just ask each speaker to just give a final piece of advice as I share my screen.
I'll pop up and maybe repeat myself a little bit, but basically don't feel like you need to have a bunch of degrees. Of course, if you want to do that, do it, but don't feel like it's a necessity. You can go far learning on the job and getting a lot of experience there. The other piece of advice that we've all said is find mentors. They're so critical, so important. They uplift you and encourage you to do things you would never imagine doing. I mentioned my mentor who's on this Zoom watching. He's the one who encouraged me to become a CEO. I would have never done that. So they're just so important. And finally, create your own path. Don't be locked into what you think you're supposed to do, what society tells you to do, what you're supposed to do in your career, in your environment. Create the environment that you want for yourself using your unique identity, your unique traits. And good luck, and please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you so much for having me.
My clickbait advice would be to apply for jobs like a man, and in the spirit of women in science, that's my advice. I say that because as a postdoc, I read a statistic that women will typically not apply for jobs unless they have all of the qualities that are listed on the job requisition form, whereas men will apply if they have 50% of those qualities. And I confirmed this with a couple of my male colleagues, and one of them, who was very talented, laughed and said, not even 50%, like maybe 30%, and I'll apply. So I would say this is not something that's advice specifically for women, but really for everybody, which is don't self-select yourself out of opportunities. The worst that can happen is that you get a no, and then you move on. So, really go out there and reach for it.
I would give, this is a very specific piece of advice, but I think it's especially helpful for those who are going into their first interviews. And it's talk to yourself and talk out loud. So as you're preparing for your interviews and you're thinking about questions, like get used to the verbal muscle memory of talking and answering things, because it's incredibly different than thinking the answer to a thing. And so just get used to talking to yourself, talking in the mirror, those kinds of things. So you just get comfortable with those ways of talking, and you kind of create those new paths. It's like your little pitch on like, well, so tell me about yourself, all of that stuff. So you just kind of get used to it. So I would say just talk to yourself, and answer questions that you might think you would get, especially because that'll put you in a more conversational comfort zone when you are out there interviewing, and that'll really help set you up for success. So it's a very specific tidbit, but I think it can be really helpful if you don't have a lot of interview experience.
I can just give my tips. I wanted to reiterate, to the extent it's available to you, use that 10% rule for yourself to invest in your own career development, whether that is participating in committee work outside that is adjacent or peripherally related to your career track, or just thinking about things, or investigating resources outside of the job that continue to help develop your career, your soft skills, and anything like that is going to help with leadership opportunities, negotiation, any of that. So that's kind of like maybe it doesn't have to be 10% for you, but you can set what you think that might be for you. I think it's just really important that you invest in yourself and find an employer, find a job fit where where they recognize that that's important, that your career development is important to the company's success.
The one piece of advice I have is don't be afraid to try new things, even if you think you might not be good at it. Every experience is a learning experience, and every experience is what you make of it. So always be willing to say yes within reason, of course, but don't be afraid to try new things and to really explore different areas you may not have thought of.
Great. Thank you so much again for sharing your experiences. I'm sure our audience they were able to get a good insight out of it. And if anyone has any further questions, please feel free to reach out to them. And thank you so much again for being here, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Everyone.